Hi everybody, welcome to this Facebook Live on the 24th of January 2019. It's nice to have you with me. If you are logging on, say hello. It'll just take a few moments for people to catch up with me. Let me just see if I can tip this down a little bit more. There we are. It's a bit more comfortable. Hi Amy. Hi Karen. Lovely. Thank you for joining us. So I've got lots of questions that have been put in by email and also comments on the Facebook group, the Facebook page. Hi Sarah. Hi Louise. Let me just start you off with this thing. I put out some videos this week, and I came across some research. I was actually doing some research about fibromyalgia and hypervigilance, which I'll come to in a moment. Hi Amy. Hi Becky. And I came across this research, which was a meta-analysis, which means lots of research papers and published research papers are collected, and then an analysis is done on the results of all of those papers. And so the one that I looked at, they had 1,418 patients, NHS patients. Hi, Amanda. And they looked at the comparison of face-to-face CBT and computer-based CBT. And the general consensus was that face-to-face CBT and computer-based CBT are equivalent in terms of patient outcomes. Now, I've been saying this for years because I did this research years ago, and if you're interested in some of the research I did, you'll find a YouTube channel where I'm giving a talk in Morocco, I think 2014, about the same thing. And actually, if you want to get some, you want to see some actual clinical results from NHS patients in Berkshire, then just take a look at that. But here's the thing. I hold this notion. I kind of created this kind of thing called active self-help, and it's basically this. And interestingly, the research kind of reiterated that. Hi, Vanessa. There are three basic things I think you need to be able to get ahead of depression, anxiety, etc. And the first one I think is incredibly important, and you've got to take an interest. You've got to be engaged in what it is. You can't just passively say, well, I'm anxious. That's it. You can't just say, I'm depressed. That's it. Hi, Jennifer. You can't just accept it, right? Because if you accept it, well, it's what it is. So I accept it. There's nothing I can do about it. And so everybody on here, every one of you who are watching this, you're engaged with the problem that you struggle with. You're engaged. What is it? How can I get past it? How can I defeat it? Hi, Shanna. How can I move on from it? How can I have a different life experience? You're engaged. That's brilliant. And that's the community that we want. And that's the community we build in the Panic Pit Stop support group, right? People who are interested in changing their experience. You've got to be engaged. The second thing is you need to know what to do. That's knowledge, right? And the cognitive behavior therapy approach and the computer-based ones, which is what I do, So my courses will give you everything you need. Hi, Emma. Hi, Louis. Hi, Emma. And many of you have joined the recent promotion I put out with the worry courses, the worry tools, but you've got my app. Some of you are already on one of my courses. You can get all the tools that you need. And the third thing is, and it's the thing I was talking about today in the video, and also I put out as a blog post, that's practice. Now, I thought about this and I wrote it down, and you may have seen it or you may not have done. I'll look at that in a minute, Vanessa. You may have seen this or you may not have done. Today is a consequence of what you practiced yesterday, and tomorrow is a consequence of what you practice today. It has to be that way, right? Tomorrow will not be that much different from today because today has been practiced. So today is a blueprint for tomorrow, and yesterday was a blueprint for today. Now here's the thing: if you're not satisfied with what you've got, if you're not satisfied with your experience, then you have to practice something different today, so that the blueprint for tomorrow is a bit different. If you want to play the piano, what did they say, 15 minutes a day, and the next thing you know, you can play the piano, right? And you get better and better and better. The power of practice, right? Now, unconsciously, you practice language, you practice behavior, you practice driving, you practice thinking. Every day you practice everything. You practice getting dressed, you practice getting undressed. Every day you practice stuff. And you acquire a certain skill level. Hi, Sean. Man. And so it's obvious that your world is a combination and an accumulation of everything that you've practiced to this point. Now, I commonly see people who've been depressed or anxious for 17, 20, since they were teenagers, and they're 50 now. I mean, just long periods of time. And that's because they've been practicing it, and they haven't been practicing an alternative to it. They haven't been practicing not being depressed. Now, that's not the same as wanting it. It's not the same as like, I want to be depressed, I want to be anxious. Nobody wants that. But you have to practice something different to change the path, to change the trajectory of your future. And if you do that, it is inevitable that your future will be different. It has to be. It can't remain the same. If you practice something different, it has to be different in the future. So I just wanted to hi Sarah, I just wanted to kind of reinforce that. It's been on the videos that I put out this week, but I really want everybody in the group and everyone who's interested in actually changing their lives to take an interest, which is what you're doing, to get the knowledge. I say you can get the knowledge through one of my courses. I mean, you can get the knowledge through face-to-face therapy. That's as good as computer-based CBT. Get the knowledge somehow and then practice. Do not, please, sit in distress and then complain about being distressed. Do something constructive today, or whenever you get an opportunity, and make your future different. I think that is the ultimate of like life design, right? You're taking control of your future. So there's my rant. Oh, and by the way, the online courses, Dr. Purvis online CBT courses, the first 2 weeks is only £1. The second 2 weeks would be about 34. So you get a whole month of computer-based CBT for £34, which actually is a pretty good deal in my opinion. So if you want to check that out, go to drpurvis.online. Now, I had a question, which is interesting. I have fibromyalgia as well as ME and Hashimoto's, and I've read that hypervigilance is now considered to be a part of fibromyalgia. And I'd be interested to hear how I can help myself not be hypervigilant, or the best way to cope with it. And it is right that, like everybody says who's interested in this kind of thing, that hypervigilance is like a big thing. What they really mean is that you get a pain symptom, or you get something happen, you focus your attention on it, and then you're now watchful and wary that something similar is going to happen. And I think, of course, with fibromyalgia, pain can erupt, anywhere in principle. And I looked into it because I was actually a really good question. And it's probably not the case where people with fibromyalgia are probably not hypervigilant. It's very hard experimentally to demonstrate that someone with fibromyalgia is more hypervigilant than just regular folks. So actually, it's probably a bit of an error. But what it is apparent is that fibromyalgia is associated with just a load of other issues which probably make it look like hypervigilance. I won't go into it, but really, I think the general evidence is that fibromyalgia is implicated in inhibitory control. So it's hard to control your attention being pulled to something. It's hard to switch tasks. It's hard to, like what's called cognitive set. It's hard to switch from one thing to another thing, from one way of thinking to another way of thinking. Decision making's impaired, and people feel defeated and trapped. So we can say that there's actually quite a lot of what's called cognitive deficits in fibromyalgia, which is what makes it a more difficult thing to treat. However, I didn't want to just sort of end on that note. I also wanted to flag up that fibromyalgia is quite amenable to CBT treatment. So with CBT treatment, it's possible to reduce tiredness, to improve cognitive function, and to reduce overall pain levels. So the way that CBT would interact with fibromyalgia is to reduce negative thinking, to reduce catastrophizing, and also, the CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, the behavior bit is about behavior, And so there's some good evidence to suggest that operant conditioning, which is conditioning behavior, has some benefits with fibromyalgia. And I wanted to just flag up, there's an interesting thing which I think is kind of really relevant to every anxiety disorder, but we can kind of like talk about it right now, and it's the fear and avoidance. It's obvious and it makes sense to avoid things that you're frightened of. Right, you're frightened of tigers, avoid tigers. You're frightened of high places, well, fair enough, avoid high places because high places are dangerous. You're frightened of snakes, avoid snakes. You're frightened of something which doesn't exist except in fantasy, or you're frightened of something that your body does, which would be like a pain sensation, for instance. And if you avoid evoking that, you're starting to structure your world through practice so that it becomes smaller and smaller. So it's a bit like, you know, we have a comfort zone, and everyone's comfort zone is a bit different. And if you always make decisions based on fear, you know, I can't do that because it might cause this, I can't do that because that might happen, then in principle, you're reducing your comfort zone, which basically means you're reducing the area in life that you can function. And that tends to increase the feeling of defeat, loss of control, and depression. So even with fibromyalgia, which is, it can be a difficult thing to treat, it's treatable. The important thing is to get on the journey of doing something different, and I'm advocating CBT and operant conditioning. And, you know, we can talk about that at another time, and certainly I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody who's interested in that. Okay, so the second question I got, and this is kind of interesting in a way because it sort of speaks to a number of different things. I work as part of a large team, so there's a lot of working with people. A lot of processes are quite convoluted and not as efficient as they should be. Therefore, I'm not able to work in the perfect way I would like. I need to gain acceptance over this, but I've not been able to so far. I just keep trying to make everything brilliant and failing and getting angry. It's terrible for my stress levels, but I can't seem to stop it. So I'm gonna attach that question with another question because I think it makes sense to do that. So I received this by email, and it goes like this. I received your email about questions on mental health, and what I really want to know is how not to be affected and mentally drained and frustrated by a psychopath who happens to be family and a neighbor in the same building, and his only goal in life is to make my life as miserable by doing silly underground things to annoy me virtually every single day while trashing me and the rest of the family, by playing the role of a good guy and victim to them and turning everyone against me with terrible lies. I don't know if there's any way for me not actually to care and just ignore him, but each time it's very, you know, annoying and upsetting. Do you have a mental trick, a way to think about these moments? Right, okay. So I'd like to just tell you a story. Those two things really are, in a sense, and it goes with stress as well. If someone is irritating or upsetting you, or if someone else is in charge, or if someone else is unreasonable, or if someone else violates your kind of your internal beliefs of what it is you need to do, then in principle, if you're upset, they're in charge of you, right? If you're upset, they're in charge of you. Now, in terms of the psychopath or the bully or the boss or anybody who's, you know, persistently kind of upsetting you or creating stress for you or not allowing you to do what you need, I think of them as a tyrant. Now, a tyrant is someone who is self-interested and basically milks the population for their own worth, their own value. So we might call Saddam Hussein a tyrant. We might call Assad of Syria a tyrant. Well, we would actually. We'd call Kim Jong-un a tyrant. We might even go so far as to call the president of Russia a tyrant. I mean, lots of people are tyrants. It's obvious, right? Chairman Mao is a tyrant. Hitler's a tyrant. Stalin's a tyrant. Just loads of tyrants. Napoleon's a tyrant, actually. So these are powerful people, or they're seemingly powerful, and they control us because we give them control over us. So I just want to tell you a story. So I used to be a North Sea diver. For 12 years, I was a North Sea diver. I was what's called a saturation diver, which meant that I used to dive down really deep. So the deepest I've been is 560 feet under the North Sea, on the bottom of the seabed, and it's lovely down there. Okay, I just dropped my amplifier on the floor and hit myself on the foot. Now, I got bored of being a diver, and I wanted to go to university and study psychology. So I did 2 A-levels in 6 months. And I got a place at Lancaster University. But then I got a tax bill because all divers are self-employed, and I couldn't afford to go to university in 1989. So I had to go and work for another year. It happened to be a slow time in the North Sea, so I went to work in India for the company I worked for, Subsea Offshore. Now, I worked all over the place, but India wasn't a very good job. It wasn't very well paid, and I went out in the monsoon season. So I was on a ship in the monsoon season in India, and it was horrendously dangerous. Big seas, ships doing all sorts of crazy things, and people were getting injured all over the place because all this big stuff is rocking and rolling in the middle of the sea, and the boat's going up and down like this. So if you put anything down to get near the seabed, it's up and it's banging on the seabed or the diver's head or whatever you like. So horrendous. The superintendent on that boat was called Bob. And his nickname was Bagum Bob, which basically means he had a reputation for sacking people. And he liked to sack people. It was like a hobby. And if it was a stress release for him or whatever. And he decided that he didn't like me. And so he started to make me do things which were, beneath me in a sense. So I'm a professional diver. I'm a North Sea diver, massively experienced, hundreds of hours underwater. So he said, Dave, I want you to needle gun the deck of this ship. We didn't even own the ship. That's just a charter ship. Had an Indian crew, No, I want you to needle gun the deck and paint the deck. So a needle gun is like a little pneumatic gun with little needles. It goes, and it just chips the paint away. And so now, normally a diver would say, I'm not doing that. Get me a helicopter. I'm going home. And you get a job somewhere else because, it was like that. But there weren't so many jobs, and I wanted the money because I wanted to go to university. I had to pay my tax bill. So I said, OK, Bob. So I spent days sitting on an upturned bucket, needle gunning the deck. And I was reading a book at the time, and I just got this inspiration, right? There are benefits to living under a tyrant. And so whenever Bob came past me, I was always singing a song. I knew some songs, Fred Astaire songs. So I was always singing a song, and I just needle gun the deck and I paint the deck. And all the while, people are off in little boats getting injured left, right, and center. And I'm doing my meals and I'm finishing my shift and whatnot. So I needle gun the entire deck of the ship. Then he said, take all the paint off the wet bell. The wet bells are like a little bell for going down maybe 150 feet, not far. Take all the paint off the wet bell, put an undercoat on it, paint it again. So I was outside now in the sunshine, so I'm painting. I take all the paint off the wet bell with a needle gun. I put the undercoat on, I put the top coat on. He comes along and he says, nah, that's not good enough. Take the whole thing off again, do it again. So I took the whole thing off again and did it again. And all the while I'm smiling, I'm saying, oh, watch you don't get injured when you go out there. It's pretty rough out there. And I'm busy doing my thing. I'm in bed one night, Bob comes in, he says, get your kit, you're going into saturation. So I get my kit, I go into saturation, I bounce down to 500 feet, and all of a sudden I'm making $10,000 a week. So the moral of the story is this. I did not allow him to follow his agenda and make me leave because he fancied getting on somebody's case, right? He's a bully. So I decided, actually, I want to stay here. So I'm quite happy to do anything you like, because you know what? I get paid exactly the same amount, whether I'm needle gunning the deck or I'm out risking life and limb, jumping off oil rigs into the sea because it's too rough to take a boat alongside. So the moral of the story is this, right? If you recognize that you have to give your control to another person for them to control you, then once you recognize that, once you understand that, you all of a sudden become in control of your emotional response. So they can do whatever they like, right? But if you're able to take, I say 3 steps back, if you're able to take 3 steps back, see the bigger picture is actually, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be upset. I don't want to be, leave the job, because actually I want the job. take 3 steps back to see the bigger picture and recognize that the benefit is every time they try to do something, you have an opportunity to do something different from what you would normally do. And that is the benefit of living under a tyrant. They give you an opportunity to do something different. Now, this brings me to another question, which is a question about, someone said, I'm wondering about going part-time. Oh, let me just do questions here, first of all. Let me have a drink of tea while I do that. So, the role of hormones in depression and anxiety. Virtually every physiological response we have in our body, not the brain, but the body, is determined by hormones. So adrenaline is a hormone. Epinephrine is a precursor to adrenaline. It's a hormone. And I think in America they call adrenaline epinephrine or whatever, I think. So hormones are incredibly influential, if you like, with respect to mood, circadian rhythm, sleep, and incredibly important in anxiety. But here's the thing. The endocrine system, which is the thing that releases hormones into our body, is controlled and determined by what our brain tells it to do. So hormones, I mean, obviously there are lots of automatic processes that we're not even aware of. You have no idea what your thyroid's doing. I mean, just no idea. You probably wouldn't even know where to look for it. And even if you did, is it overactive? Is it underactive? What's going on? No idea. But the kind of hormones that give us real big changes, you know, a rush of adrenaline or a flush of fear, we have some control over those, and those are controlled by the brain telling the endocrine system what to do. So I would say that there's not much we can say about the endocrine system other than think about the way we think about it in psychoneuroimmunology. The psychology of the nervous system or neuronal system, immunology. So how does our stress level, for instance, affect our hormone secretion and therefore our overall kind of performance? So high level of anxiety, perceived anxiety. So I perceive something threatening, which might be to give a public talk, for instance. I perceive something threatening. That makes my brain recognize threat. That makes my adrenals secrete adrenaline in my bloodstream. That makes my whole my whole system be activated. That gives me a high bowel motility, which makes you want to go to the toilet. But if that happens a lot, you've got irritable bowel. Okay, so we can cascade it from the bowel up through to I see a threat. Now, I would always say to you, is there a threat? Let's bring cognitive control, that's thinking control over the emotional system. Because if we allow the emotions just to be like completely in charge, then all sorts of things could happen, and we're just really a hostage. It's a bit like living under the tyranny of emotions, right? You have to have emotions, and emotions give life color. But if they're in charge, that's tyranny, because you don't get to choose what you want. You just have to do what your emotions tell you to do. Vanessa, the worry course. Go to Dr. Purvis online, and you'll see that if you put in just your name and email, you'll get access to a short course with the worry films in it. If you've got the app, the worry films are also on the app. But I'm thinking of taking the app down because it's expensive to keep it where it is. And I was thinking of just putting everything, well, I'm looking into having everything put on from the app, put onto a short course. But right now, the worry tools are there, so use those. Is hypervigilance the same as a highly active? I think I've dealt with that. Okay, so, so, I was wondering about going part-time. Most of my life I've been fighting off winter bugs, and generally the idea is that the immune system is not as strong as it might be for various reasons, catching a lot of colds, etc., and bugs and other kinds of things. Sorry, just to carry the story on. Been doing more exercise, not as much as I'd like, since balancing this, so don't overdo it. So wondering whether to go down because the 3 days a week, because I find it hard to accept I can't do what I think I should be able to. Trying to lower expectations, but stubborn perfectionist tendency brain not making it easy. Looks like perfectionism, high standards is an important hurdle for me. And once cracked will make a difference. So I enjoy imperfect things more now, but standards for me are too high. So it sounds to me that the tyrant that you're living under, this is starting to look like a theme, the tyrant that you're living under is yourself. You're your, I don't know, worst enemy maybe? You're the person who makes life difficult for you. I mean, I know this person, and they're in my mastermind group, highly competent, highly efficient, highly effective, intelligent, professional, actually do a brilliant job, right? No one really has any cause to criticize for doing a good job, but you're the tyrant. That you're holding yourself to account in far more harshly than you need to. So if I turn my tyrant story around to you, you're the one that needs to step back from yourself and say, actually, the problems I have, I am making myself, because I am holding myself to a standard which is too high for where I am now. So that's a bit of acceptance, isn't it? Now, the thing about perfectionists, I know loads of perfectionists. Everyone I meet is a perfectionist, right? They're always massively efficient, massively effective, until they bounce from being perfect to the opposite side, which of course is, if you don't know, being perfectionist is there's two places to be. It's a categorical black and white way of thinking. You're perfect, or you are the opposite of perfect, which is failure. So you try really, really hard to occupy the perfect pole of that polarity. And after a bit, if you feel that you can't occupy the perfect pole, then you have to bounce to feeling like a failure. You're not perfect, you're not a failure, but that's not the point. You bounce to feeling like a failure. That's when people burn out, go off sick, get a massive stress response, can't cope, etc., etc. We have to stop that from happening, because you know what? Everybody lives in the middle. Be a perfectionist, don't be a perfectionist, makes no difference. You're still living more or less in the middle. Nothing is perfect. Nothing is a failure, except unless you think about it that way, unless you interpret it, unless you give something the meaning of being a failure, because otherwise it's actually just getting on with life. So go down to part-time hours if you want to, but it won't necessarily solve the problem of being a tyrant to yourself. And what we need to do is to be kinder to yourself. So let me see questions. I'm not really very well up on female sexual hormones. Sorry, Vanessa. I mean, we can look into it. I'm happy to look into it and come back to you. My impression that I recollect from writing about this previously is there's not as big an effect as we might think. Now, it is true that typically women experience depression at approximately twice the rate of men. That is true, and we don't actually know why, and people have looked into it. And if you want to do research yourself, the woman who's the kind of #1 expert is called, her surname is Nolan Hoxima. I can't remember her first name. She's done tons of research, but even then she finds it hard to find a really strong relationship between female hormones and depression. So it could be all sorts of things. It could be, you know, societal expectations, cultural expectations, you know, historical female gender roles. It could be all sorts of things. Possibly not hormones as much as we might imagine it would be. And, you know, of course, everyone's experience is different and idiosyncratic. So that's just a generalization. Okay, so, yes, Becky, oops, sorry. So there's a question, and this is an interesting one. Why do I keep feeling faint? Today was a good day, got through uni until lunchtime, and my heart suddenly started racing, and I was shaking uncontrollably. My vision went, I almost passed out, had to leave, panicky for no reason. This is not living. Fair enough, I agree. Now, the question is this. did you faint or did you feel faint? Now, if you've, I know we've had a little bit of correspondence on the group. I think Becky had difficulty downloading the Panic Pit Stop app. Typically, with panic, you don't faint. Typically, with panic, it's really hard to faint. You can only faint when your blood pressure drops. And I think the number's like 40 beats per minute, right? Well, that's your pulse rate. But your blood pressure has to drop for you to faint. Now, some people have what's called a blood phobia. Needle phobia will do it too, but the blood phobia, and that means as soon as you see blood, you faint, because as soon as you see blood, your blood pressure drops so low that you have to faint to be able to be in a safe position and to recover. But apart from that, anxiety actually sends your blood pressure up. So it's actually, unless you're one of those people who faints at the sight of blood, actually it's very, very hard to faint and be anxious, because your blood pressure is going up, not going down, which is what you need for a faint. But what Becky's actually saying, sorry, I hope you don't mind me using your name, Jane. It sounds like a panic attack, right? And a panic attack is the pinnacle, it's the peak of an anxiety attack. And if you're in a lecture at university, you know, you look around, there isn't any threat. You'll probably interpret the threat as not being able to get out. You'll probably interpret the threat as looking exposed, like I'll pass out and I'll look stupid, I'll go mad, people will see that I'm not normal, people will see something wrong with me. Those are the actual threats that you're fighting against. My suggestion is that you do try to get hold of the Panic Pit Stop app, which will take you through quite a lot of stuff, which will explain lots of stuff about that, and which will really help you. Panic is, as I said, the pinnacle of anxiety. But once you've got rid of the panic, then you've got the anxiety. So anxiety is an overestimation of threat. So your actual threat is what you're anticipating is going to happen, and that is catastrophizing, right? So you're likely to be catastrophizing what's likely to happen, and that's causing your anxiety to ramp up. So oh, Becky said, Jane says she's fainted at university 3 times. I would wonder then if you're a person who faints at the sight of blood. That'd be interesting, and that would require a slightly different approach. In which case, here's a little trick for you, Jane. Now, we're agreed that your blood pressure has to drop for you to faint. Now, if you feel at all faint, contract your thighs and release them. Contract them and release them. Contract them and release them. And do that until you feel better. Your thighs are the biggest muscles in your body, and you've got lots of blood vessels that go through them. And as you squeeze them, contract your thigh and let it go, contract it, you're actually pumping up your blood pressure by contracting the blood vessel and releasing it, contracting it. And that's a good anti-fainting technique. I've taught it to numbers of people, and they find it really useful, particularly with blood phobics and needle phobics, right? Because it just gives them enough control not to faint and to get through the thing, which then in turn makes them feel that they can do it without it being a fainting experience. So contract and release your thighs. It sounds a little bit indelicate, but the muscles. So sometimes I feel like I might say something in public. I don't want to, I'm racist or cruel. I have no desire to say these things, but I might do. Okay, so this is feeling that you don't have control over what comes out of your mouth. Have you ever, without being under the influence, have you ever said anything that was not congruent with who you are? It's really, well, let me ask the question. Has anybody really said anything that is incongruent with who they are as a person? So let's say you're not at all racist, right? You're just not at all racist. And yet you went and said some terrible racist things. You've got no opinion whatsoever about something, and then all of a sudden you just blurt out some strong opinions about something. I would suggest to you, so put in whether you've said it, have you acted out of character? Because it's unlikely to be the case that you have. I'll tell you why. I do not know what's going to come out of my mouth next, but I'm fairly confident that what's going to come out of my mouth is more or less more of the same that was coming out of my mouth before, right? I'm unlikely to say anything that's kind of like crazy off the wall or not relevant to what I'm talking about, because everything that I'm going to say is pre-packaged in pre-conscious. So I have created the arguments I'm going to use before I'm aware of having done it or having said it. So what comes out of my mouth is as much a surprise to me as it is to you. Oh dear. I know it sounds a bit strange, but I promise you it's true, right? It just comes out. I think, oh, that's interesting. I never thought of that before. But it's congruent with who you are. What you're expressing, Tracy, is you're expressing a fear that you might embarrass yourself. But I would have thought it very unlikely that you'd do that. It's indicative of social anxiety, right? In social anxiety, you feel exposed and you feel watched and like kind of looked at, and you feel like people are paying attention to you. People are kind of like waiting for you to make a mistake. And then afterwards, you're doing something called post-event processing, where you go, did I say something stupid? Did I say something to offend that person? Do you think that person was offended because I said this and that and the other? And all of that makes you much more aware of what you're saying than you should be. Speaking in flow, you're perfectly fine. You can never say anything that's incongruent with who you are, because there's just no point to it. And your brain, is on the ball. But worrying about it makes you bring a thought process to something which is automatic, and that feels odd. If you ever try driving a car really consciously, it's really hard to do, because the best driving is automatic. You have a little bit of consciousness, paying attention, but you're automatically doing it. As soon as you start to really think about it carefully, it's really hard, because everybody else is driving automatic, and automatic is much faster in thought process than conscious. And so you go, my God, it's really dangerous. It's really dangerous. Look, everyone's doing this kind of stuff. But everybody should drive automatically, and then we're fine. More or less nothing much happens. And so thinking about what you're saying is really a bad idea. Wondering whether you said something right or wrong is also a really bad idea, because it just it kind of fosters and perpetuates and practices social anxiety. So okay. So yeah, I haven't seen blood. I'm in my foundation. Yeah, I fainted on my first day. Okay. I think then you must be the sort of person who, with anxiety or whatever, has low blood pressure. That's worth figuring out. And then do the thigh exercise and see if that resolves it for you. But nevertheless, you're overestimating the threat you're under. And that's the thing that you could do with your brain, right? You've got to modify the sense of threat, the belief that there's threat. And I know fainting feels like a threat, but the secret of the ultimate secret of not having panic. Does anyone know? Quickly, does anyone know the ultimate secret of not having a panic attack? While I have a drink of tea. What's the ultimate secret of not having a panic attack? Anybody, type it in quickly. Anyone putting it in? What's the secret of not having a panic attack? Oh, I don't see anything yet. Well, I'll come back to it in a minute. Tracy says she feels totally watched. Okay. Tracy, you're not watched. Now, here's the thing though. Do you watch people to see if they're watching you? If you watch people to see if they're watching you, what do people then do back to you? So if you look at somebody looks back at you, okay? So there's a little bit of a trick that we do there that makes us feel that people are watching us, because if we look at them to see if they're watching us, they might look back at us, and because that's what people do. But actually, as soon as you start, it's a general principle. I would just ignore people, really, because everyone else ignores you in a nice way. The people that love you, care about you, they don't ignore you. But the general population, they don't care about you. They ignore you and go about their business. Don't get in the way, because they'll run you down. Nobody's watching you. Feeling watched is an overestimation of threat again, but it's also a social anxiety element, because you catastrophize what will happen if you make a mistake. So we need to talk about that. And of course, you know, we can talk about it in the mastermind group. Actually, we can devise some things in the mastermind group that will be useful. We can start to put that to bed. Okay. Not shaking your legs, but squeezing the thighs tight. Squeeze your thighs and then release. Squeeze and release, and it pumps up your blood pressure. Okay. So I have the Panic Pit Stop app, and it helped me a lot probably 6 months ago. But after a trip to the emergency room in a week on muscle relaxers, the anxiety is back with heart palpitations. And I feel like I'm back to square one. I appreciate the work you do. I just wish I could get over this for good. The question is, do you know if a week on muscle relaxers can trigger anxiety when you go off them? And I think that's the point. I think what we have is, I'm calling it a contrast effect. So if you're on a week on muscle relaxers, and then you come off them, then you've got a change. And a change catches your attention. A change can capture your attention, and that can be sufficient to trigger an anxiety attack, right? Because you will feel different after coming off a week of muscle relaxants as opposed to being on them. But you have to recognize, well, I think the thing what we have to do is you have to recognize that you will feel different, but it doesn't mean anything. It's just a contrast, right? It's like having a cold, not having a cold. You feel different, but it doesn't mean anything inherently. What you've done is you've catastrophized that feeling of being a bit different, because it's a physical feeling, you know, with muscle relaxants. You've catastrophized that feeling and you've turned it into a threat, and that's then caused you to feel like you're having a heart attack or whatever, and go to the emergency room. But going to the A&E with panic is so common. I mean, Jennifer will tell you stories of going to the A&E 3 times before she found the Panic Pit Stop course. And so it's very, very common. Where you are now, fine, okay, you feel like you've gone back to square one, but you've got some information, you've got some knowledge, you've got to the app, go back to the app, go back to using it. And do you remember, if you were here at the very beginning, I said, you've got to take an interest in what the problem is, okay? You've got anxiety, and that you had the peak of anxiety, so you felt like you're having a heart attack or palpitations, but it's just anxiety. You've got some knowledge about the anxiety. You've been through the app, maybe join the Panic Pit Stop course, go through the course, put the thing to bed through practice. Change what you're doing and practice this change until you put the whole thing to bed, and then it's done. You don't really need to struggle with it again after that. Okay, so Vanessa's asking about the mastermind info. The mastermind is it's like a small coaching group, and we have a call once a month for about an hour. And in the first instance, we have like a video call to set things up, and then we have a call, and also you have access to me, and I try my best to help you. So it's like group coaching in a way. To be on the mastermind course, you have to also be on the online courses, because they form the basis of what we do, and then we come in and we talk about specific problems, and we give specific tips and tools, and we kind of process it, and then we also refer back to the Panic Pit Stop mood control things as well, because they're the backbone of the treatment strategy. The mastermind is just to give you an extra boost, to give you extra coaching and extra focus and accountability in a way, because we set things up that you do, and then we check back with you. So if anyone's interested in joining the mastermind, we can open it. Please email me at panicpitstop100@gmail.com if you're interested in joining the mastermind, and I can set you up with a way in, if that's okay. Okay, so Vanessa, going off Valium or antidepressants brings anxiety back because it's been suppressed, but if it comes back as soon as you come off them. Okay. That's a rebound effect. Let's just take it down to basics. Let's say there are two components to anxiety. Well, let's put it this way. Anxiety is the physical feeling of threat. That's it. Your body is responding to an actual physical threat when there isn't one. Your brain has created the sense of threat by interpreting things that happen in everyday life as threatening to you. They're not threatening to you. So antidepressants, Valium and everything, they're artificially managing your physiology. They're artificially managing the expression of the physical expression of threat. They don't really manage so much the cognitive interpretation of the world that makes the threat feel real. Okay, so if you're going to come off Valium or antidepressants or anything like that, just coming off them without doing some cognitive work, some CBT, you might be all right, but you might not, because you haven't changed your thinking processes, which cause the anxiety in the first place. So it's chance. It's a matter of chance. And I just said, typically, because you're kind of sensitive to how you feel physically, you know, once you start to feel different, that's really easy to catastrophize and really easy to say, oh, you know, it's all going to go terribly wrong, and I'm not going to be able to cope, and all sorts of other things. So I would suggest that obviously you do it under doctor's supervision, but if you come off stuff without having an alternative set of tools set up in here, you know, it's a bit random. It could go well, or it could not go well, and it depends really. There's no way of predicting it in my opinion. Now, I wanted to just share with you something I came across today, which is really quite interesting, I thought. It's called, I wrote it down so I won't forget. It's called obstacle thinking. And I thought it was really quite interesting, you know, how we set New Year's goals, okay? And I'm not a big one for New Year's goals, but actually, you know, the change of the year, it is a sort of a time for like taking stock and doing stuff, right? You know, you may have seen I put out some stuff. Let's make 2019 the year of good mental health, right? But there's obstacle thinking. As soon as you set a goal, does your mind not start to find reasons why these goals don't make sense, right? Let's make 2019 the year that I get rid of depression. Yeah, but you know, you've been depressed for 5 or 6 years. There's no way you can not be depressed. Yeah, but everything's horrible. Nothing goes right for you. You're unlucky. You know, relationship problems, all sorts of obstacles, right? And every time your brain creates an obstacle for you, it chips away at that motivation that you get from setting a goal, right? Right, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be fit in 2019. Yeah, well, you know, you can't be fit. You're overweight, and you've never been fit. You know, your heart's not very good, and it's too cold. You know, and okay, so I'd like to offer this thought. It's like a final thought, if you like. Let's pay attention to obstacle thinking. Let's bring it into awareness, and let's recognize it as a process. Now, we can think of it as negative thing, but I like obstacle thinking, right? Because it keeps placing obstacles in your path. It's like someone is walking in front of you, you know, traffic cones. Imagine little mini traffic cones, and they're just popping little obstacles in front of you as you walk on your path, as you try to do the things that you're doing. And that actually, after a bit, becomes tedious and tiring. You start tripping over, it's too much bother. It's too much bother. I'm not going to do it. Now, everybody here, well, I hope many of the people in the Panic Pit Stop group, but everyone here is engaged. And that's why I mentioned obstacle thinking, because you've got to be aware of the obstacles, because they'll trip you up if you're not paying attention. That's one of the benefits of the mastermind group, by the way. We can, it's an obstacle thinking little process going on there when you deal with that. And so it helps to have other people focus on your problem and be helpful towards you. Alcohol gives me confidence. It makes me feel like everything's okay. Okay, I've not heard that one before. Obviously, can't rely on it, as it's bad road to go down. What can I do that gives me the same confidence that everything is okay and I have control over it and it isn't artificial or addictive? Well, alcohol gives me the confidence and makes me feel like everything is okay. Whether you have a drink or whether you don't have a drink, you're exactly the same. Alcohol doesn't change you. it doesn't actually make you cleverer or less clever. I mean, if you take enough, it makes you less clever. But you're not different, right? You're talking about the psychology, the subjective psychology of confidence. It makes me feel confident that everything's okay. Everything's okay anyway. It's like saying, you've got a wooden leg. Alcohol makes me feel like I don't have a wooden leg. Well, no, you've got a wooden leg, right? Alcohol doesn't change anything. It's just a bit like a self-medication. You're a little bit less bothered. But the problem, Tracy, is that you're too bothered. And that needs to be resolved. And once you become less bothered, more indifferent to other people, then you don't need the alcohol. Although alcohol can be fun, you don't need the alcohol to feel confident because you don't make mistakes. You don't say, you know, crazy off-the-wall things. You're perfectly nice and perfectly normal. And what we want is for you to believe that. That's the problem. You've got to believe that you're perfectly normal and perfectly nice, perfectly intelligent, perfectly creative, just perfectly. And I don't mean like perfect. I mean like just absolutely normal. So the alcohol is a self-medication, and we know that's true. Louise, you're absolutely right. You know, as you know, I dance Argentine tango. I love dancing. That's a great way of well, the whole world's in Argentine tango. You know, there's fear, there's confidence, there's trepidation, there's all sorts of psychology in it. But it's a great thing to do to exercise. Seasonal affective disorder. The thing about seasonal affective disorder is that we give control of our mood to the sunshine, let's say. Okay. Now, while some people are affected by sunshine rates and sunshine levels, if SAD is something that you struggle with, we have to think about how to not give our feeling of emotional control to that. It's a bit like saying, you know, I'm addicted to this, therefore I have this disorder, therefore I can't, or whatever, or I have this disorder, which means that, right? It's just another example of giving our sense of emotional control to something. And that can defeat us if we're not very careful, because once we give something away, particularly something as powerful as emotional control, then, you know, we often feel bereft of it. And that does not make us feel energetic, and it does not make us feel, you know, creative and kind of engaged. So we recognize that we struggle with something. We recognize it as a problem. We step back from the problem. We don't give the problem control over us, and we do the best we can under the circumstances. We don't beat ourselves up, but we do the best we can under the circumstances, and we let the kind of the phenomena be what it is, without loading it with extra psychology or extra kind of feelings of defeat or feelings of hopelessness or I can't do anything about it, let's say. Okay. Jennifer says her doctor suggested vitamin D in a light lamp. Vitamin D is one of the most overhyped vitamins there is. I don't think there's much evidence actually that it really does anything. Although a light box is considered to be a good thing, and if you find that useful. But I think a light box has a big placebo element to it, as does an antidepressant, right? But if that works, then that's okay. So I'm inclined to draw this to a close. We're nearly an hour in. I'd just like to say that please share anything that we put out. I haven't said this for ages, but like Louise put it out, she says, can I share this with some friends? Please share everything that comes out, because the more people that we reach, the more people we can help. Panic, anxiety, depression, stress, most problems, to be honest. And I work with people with schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorders, paranoid, all sorts of problems. They're all treatable. Oh, by the way, sorry, I did forget. There's a question really, two questions I forgot. Okay. How do we deal with low-level grumbling anxiety? I wake up with this apprehension. Is it habitual? How to break the cycle? Low-level grumbling anxiety, you wake up with it. My suggestion is the Kilimanjaro experiment. If you look back through the Panic Pit Stop support group, you'll find an audio called the Kilimanjaro experiment, and you'll also find the panic symptom checklist, excuse me, which is part of the Kilimanjaro experiment. You'll find videos on, if you're in the Panic Pit Stop program, you'll find videos and you'll find the audio downloads in the Life Change module. And if you're not in the Panic Pit Stop program, you'll find them on my YouTube channel or on the drpurvis.online blog. The Kilimanjaro experiment is an EMDR, excuse me, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR audio with a guided imagery on top. And when we ran the experiment in the group, virtually everyone who used it experienced less anxiety after using it for a week. So the thing is, you download the audio, you put it on your phone or whatever, and you listen to it last thing at night with headphones on. The audio is the EMDR audio, goes from one side of your head to the other, which is the effect. It breaks up your thoughts. And there's a guided imagery which helps you to feel safer. Do it consistently every night of the week for a week and report back. Some people say it's really hard to get to the top of Kilimanjaro because I fall asleep beforehand, but it actually is a useful thing to do. So that's the solution to that one, Amanda. The other thing, of course, is you're running brain programs, which are kind of belief systems and like just cognitive programs, which are making you feel threatened and anxious. And because you're running them a lot in the background, you're suffering the consequences of practice, and you're also continuing to practice them. So you have to get on top of it by, I would suggest, running mantras and, like lots of other CBT tools during the day to convince your brain that you're not under threat. So you've got two things, right? You need CBT tools during the day, Kilimanjaro experiment last thing at night. I'm prepared to bet you a shiny 5p coin that after 7 days you feel less anxious waking in the morning. So I hope that's useful to you. The other question was, what's the difference between anxiety and suspicion? The answer is, anxiety is self-focused. You're anxious about yourself. Now you might say, well, I'm anxious about my kids. Yeah, you're anxious about how bad you'll feel if something happens to them. Now, I know you're anxious, I know you're concerned about them, but your anxiety is typically self-focused. How will they survive? How will they do if I'm not here? How bad will they feel if I'm not here? But you're living that feeling of anxiety. So anxiety is self-focused. Suspicion is other-focused. What if they did something to me? So you're attributing other people with a malevolent intent with suspicion, whereas you're feeling threatened yourself with anxiety. I know it's a subtle difference, but it kind of matters though, because if you're suspicious, that's on the continuum towards paranoia, and that's not what we want actually. We want you to be safe, we want you to be careful, we want you to be normal and to live a normal life. Some people are nice, some people are not nice, but if we're suspicious, everybody has the potential to be someone that we can't trust. That's not so comfortable as a place to be. What do I think about subliminal hypnosis or something like the Kilimanjaro, being on a loop whilst you sleep? Subliminal hypnosis doesn't work. It's a myth. To a large extent. Subliminal messaging is a myth, actually. The thing where, do you remember the cinema where they put little subliminal messages or snipped into the film, so you can't really see them, but they tell you to do something like buy a Coke or got some ice cream. That subliminal messaging doesn't really work. What we're interested in really is finding ways to change the beliefs we have about ourselves, about the people that we know, about the world, about the future. Every problem that you have can be traced back to a belief that you have, and that belief is wrong, right? If you're depressed, you have beliefs about yourself which are wrong. I mean, just, yeah. Right. I believe that I'm no good. I believe I'm a failure. I believe it's all going to go horribly wrong. I believe I'm unlovable. I believe there's something wrong with me. I believe I'm boring. I believe that nobody likes me. I believe that I'm not clever enough. I believe that I'm going to make mistakes. I believe that whatever, right? If you're depressed, you have a cluster of beliefs about yourself which are wrong. Now, I know they're wrong because I've worked with hundreds of people. We change the beliefs, they're not depressed anymore, right? You go through the mood control program, change your beliefs, you're not depressed anymore. The problem that you have, if you're depressed, is that you believe your own bad press. You believe the negative things you think about yourself. And how long have you been practicing them? And that's why they're believable. You practice it for years, it's believable. Look, you tell yourself you're a Martian a million times, you'll be looking for a place to hide a spaceship. You are not the problem, but you have a problem. And the problem that you have is that you believe stuff about yourself that's not true. If you have anxiety, you feel vulnerable. You believe that you're vulnerable. You believe that something bad will happen. You believe that you can't do anything. You believe that you don't have any control. You believe that you will do something and embarrass yourself. You believe that your actions will have a negative consequence. They don't. You're perfectly normal. I'm pointing at you. There is nothing wrong with you, except that you believe there is. That's why CBT and computer-based CBT work, because the whole object of the exercise, of psychotherapy, of therapy, of treatment, of CBT, of what I try to do and what I'm trying to help you with is you have to change the beliefs you have about yourself. That will take you most of the way. And I'd have to say that many of the problems that you might have are a consequence of practicing negative beliefs about yourself for a long period of time, such that it becomes physically distorting, it becomes physiological, it becomes mentally distorting. It like distorts your experience. Just know the fact, the beliefs you have about yourself, certainly the ones that create mental health problems, are wrong. Yes, so you may have seen in the Panic Pit Stop support group that we're thinking of running, the admins and I are thinking of running a first annual reunion and workshop. So we're thinking of a one-day workshop. I'll be talking about stuff. I'll be demonstrating some tools and some techniques which you can't really demonstrate so easily on video, etc. And you'll have access to me, you'll have access to the admins, we'll have an opportunity to talk about some things that would be really useful to you. We're gauging interest. We have to have enough interest to make the thing happen, because obviously it's a lot of work for us to make that happen. And it's going to be running in Berkshire. So if you're interested, please let us know by either sending us an email, but actually just type in on the Panic Pit Stop support group, I'm really interested in the workshop. It'll be a one-day thing, I think. So I think some of us will be staying over in a hotel. But it's kind of a little bit fluid right now, but we just want to see whether there's sufficient interest in meeting up and spending a day together and doing some things that would be interesting. I'll do a demonstration of emotional freedom technique. I'll show you some neat EMDR tricks that you can use to basically get rid of negative thoughts, feel more in control, deal with traumatic thoughts or past histories. I'll show you some stuff. 25 minutes, bing, it's gone. Super, dead easy. And I can demonstrate it to you, and I'll prove to you that it works, and then we can do it with you. So it's fantastic. So interesting things like that, interesting things that are kind of really helpful and useful. So please let us know if you're interested, if that's something that works for you. It will be round about, I think we're thinking of the end of March as the date. So jump on. If you don't jump on soon, we may not run it if there's not enough people, because might not be worth it. So please let us know if that's something of interest to you. Okay, we've been an hour and 5 minutes. So let me say that the group and the group support's fantastic. Thank you very much for being part of the group. Please share everything. Please continue to comment because it makes the group more visible. You will not get the change you want, however, without going through a CBT program. And that means at some point, I hope to see you on the inside of the drpurvis.online courses. Right now, 2 weeks for £1. So you've got 2 weeks of therapy, something every single day. And the second 2 weeks will be about 34. So you've got 4 weeks of online CBT, which might be sufficient to solve your problems. You've got 4 weeks for £35. That's pretty cheap, in my opinion, given that you get access to 350 of my videos and other kinds of things. So any problems, if you want to join the mastermind, please just send me an email, panicpist100@gmail.com, and I'll get right back to you. So thanks for taking the time to watch and listen. Please share everything, get people involved. The more people we contact, the more people we're involved with, the more people that we can help. And don't forget, you can crack the code. Thanks for taking the time to watch and listen.